Welcome to the Getting Past the Premium podcast, everybody. This is a show dedicated to helping insurance agents shift their focus from selling products to delivering lasting advice. I'm your host, Elliot Bassett, and each week we pick the brain of some of the top names in the risk management space. We're bringing you actionable tips for growing and scaling your book of business. Now, let's meet this week's guest. All right, welcome back to Getting Past the Premium, everybody. Today, I have with me Joshua Verch with the Baldwin Group. He is a senior advisor in their construction division. And, Joshua, I'm really excited for this conversation because I think you have a pretty cool background inside and outside of the industry and can bring a unique perspective on what you're doing today versus kind of when you started. So before we dive in, give everybody a little bit of, who you are, where you came from, those types of things, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Again, I'm Joshua Verch with the Baldwin Group, and we were formerly known as BKS Partners from our inception back in 2006. But after going public in 2019 and then acquiring a bunch of firms over the last 5 to 6 years, we finally did a national rebrand to the Baldwin Group to kind of coalesce all of our offices and 4,000 plus employees across the country. I came on here at the Baldwin Group in 2019, and as we discussed before, I actually had a background outside of insurance in both transportation logistics as well as custom home building, which is what I was in prior to coming to Baldwin on the insurance side of things. So definitely have a unique little background there that isn't just straight financial services and then into insurance.
Well, that's what I thought was interesting, which, probably gives you a little bit of a leg up when you're talking to those types of clients as well, because you understand their business a little bit more. You've sat in those shoes.
Sure.
I would imagine that helps. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, especially when you're talking to executives. So you're talking to presidents, owners, CEOs, CFOs in business. And I find that for the most part, they want to have a comfort factor in that you understand their business first. They assume you know insurance to a degree, but most people aren't well versed enough on insurance to even check you on it if they're not sure. You'll have some very savvy CFOs and guys out there in more sophisticated organizations, but they want to know that you kind of know their business first, so you have some authority with them before they're ever really going to listen to you about the risk or insurance side of things. Yeah,
definitely. No, I agree with that. And it's funny how it is difficult for business owners to vet the insurance knowledge side, which is kind of unfortunate when you think about it. But I think it's an advantage for us just from the standpoint that if you can, obviously, assuming you have the technical knowledge, if you can get in and speak their language and show them that you understand their business and that's going to influence, how you can help walk them through this process, I think that is a big advantage, 100%.
Well, definitely. And I think having the authority with these executives, and it depends on every individual business, what their experience has been when it comes to insurance, if it's just been very transactional, and it's just sort of like a checkbox they deal with. But I find, because I work with mid-market companies, so they're of different sizes, but they're growing. Some of them are at 10 million, some are at 50, some are at 100. And it's interesting how you'll see different perspectives on how their insurance has been managed during that time. And a lot of the times what I find, because I deal with construction companies, GCs and trades and such, is that a lot of times you'll have just a continuation of how they purchase their insurance when they were much smaller.
Yeah.
And then now they've grown into a different kind of animal, and everyone knows, they hear business people talk about it all the time, where it's like, hey, what you did to get to 10 million in rev won't get you to, 25 or 50. And it's sort of the same thing with insurance, is that a lot of times I find that these companies and these executives have either just outgrown the resources of the firm they started with, And that can just be a myriad of reasons, whether it's lack of industry knowledge, it could be the advisor that is working with them, or even more, recently in both big firms and small, it's just turnover. It's turnover of advisors, of service people, and maybe what started out great, now just stuff falls through the cracks. They can't get answers, and so I find that being able to talk to executives, have some authority with them, and then really be able to act like a consultant and not just like an order taker. You got to be able to question, like, well, why are you doing that? Like, what have you guys been doing, for these different areas of your business? And, sometimes people are on top of things very well, but oftentimes I find with insurance, it's kind of this quagmire of, hey, they're looking for coverage. They need to get it in place because it's required by certain contracts. Most owners or presidents, they're usually very risk aware, but it's a very kind of foggy mess because once you get very complex into the insurance world and you're dealing with all of these different, owners you're building for, subcontractors you're dealing with at different levels and sophistication, a lot of the compliance and making sure everything is working, you have all the right forms in place, you have all of the right compliance that you're checking on your subcontractors. And then not only doing that, but all the changes throughout the year, you got to have the support team. I'm not the one who's going to be doing all of the certs and, servicing your account every single day. So you got to have a team that can do that knows the industry you're in. It's just able to help you deal with kind of like little fires here and there. And we tend to, obviously in construction, you get those fires because new contract, new requirement. And do we have this coverage? No. Can you push back on it? Will they accept less? You're always like negotiating different things. And I just find it's having authority to talk to the owners and the CFOs and hold them accountable to get you the info that you need in order to help them, because even though most people don't like insurance, they don't want to deal with it, it's a pretty, high ticket line item on their balance sheet.
No, 100%. And obviously can be a big impact to their business if they're not set up correctly.
Yeah, completely. And, a lot of the times while, you come in and you find some big mistakes a lot of the time, more normally what you find is just, little sort of architectural things with how they've structured this. How is it working from like an admin perspective in terms of the project management of your renewal, which I just use because of construction. But just so it's very methodical, boring, and it isn't a fire drill, come the end. You should be able to have all your stuff in place. But really being able, I find now with the hard market, that seems to be a never-ending hard market, at least in some form or fashion. You really got to be able to tell the story when you're marketing and not just sending out, apps to get quotes on. I find like put a big bow on it, put a big narrative in place, tell the story of who they are, why they're a good risk, explain all of the, maybe losses they've had, give context, and really just make it a prettier package so an underwriter wants to look at it. Because I think sometimes people forget in our business, once you get to mid-market, that when you put in a submission, there's a human being going through that and looking at it. So the easier you can make their job, I mean, again, it's going to help in the end because it's just going to get the attention it deserves when it goes out to the market.
Dive into that a little bit. Let's get a little more specific there because I couldn't agree with you more. But I think there's a lot of people there's a lot of producers that hear that out there, and they get varying different levels of opinion on what makes a good submission, and probably are taught, get the Accord apps in as soon as you can to block the markets, and aren't really thinking about how can I sell this to the underwriter? How can I make them, to your point, comfortable? How can I show them that this is going to be a profitable account? And then also one of the best things I've heard over time is, provide the underwriter some air cover, right? So that they can underwrite the account perfectly, But when the big fire or the big work comp claim happens that, none of us can anticipate, and their supervisor says, well, why in the heck did you write that piece of business? That's going to cost us an arm and a leg. They have the documentation to say, hey, look, this is the submission that was sent in. This is everything they were doing. Like, it's just a fluke deal. Like, there's nothing.
Yep.
You can't underwrite for that. And, their supervisor then says, hey, all right, that's why they have insurance. So to dive into it, just what are you including in those narratives? What have you found that, has really worked to help sell that account to the underwriter? Like, how are you getting them comfortable? Just walk us through that a little bit more.
Well, again, I think it's all about telling the story. Human beings are human beings. They want a story. I think anytime you make decisions just based off of hard data, not a lot of context, you're not really getting the true picture of everything.
Yep.
And so when I send out a new submission to the market, first off, we want to know just up front, like, hey, if this is a certain type of risk, we're not just going to blast it out to markets where we don't think it's a fit. We want to reach out to them and say, hey, are you looking at this type of, contractor? Because in the hard market, a lot of markets have just said, we're not even going to consider anything in that, track or in that code. But I think it's important to almost kind of look at it like if you will, a job interview / really sales job to the underwriter. So I like to include like a cover letter, like you would before a resume. It just tells a brief snapshot of like, hey, here's what's to come in this submission. And it just gives a little bit of information on the firm. So it kind of sets the tone. And then you go into the narrative. And then in the narrative, I want to tell them, who's at the company, who's running the company, who's the leadership, what is their background, so they can understand a little bit of that story there. And in construction, I like to include both leadership as well as some of the key personnel, like supervisors on site or project managers, certifications they have, just history. Again, I don't try to make it a novel. Yeah, I try to make it so it's specific and just saying like, hey, they've been at the company this long, they have this OSHA training, they, blah, 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 blah. So just give a little summation of who the company is from the leadership perspective. And then you just want to go into how are they a good risk? And you can start with everything from the property that they own, if they own much as a construction company, their equipment, how they're dealing with it, taking care of it, all of that, what they're doing for their auto training, how, are they pulling MVRs monthly or is it just once a year? Going through all the things they're doing there to make sure that they're trying their best to avoid and be proactive accidents and things of that nature. And then giving them, like for construction, it's what's your work in progress report? What's your past 3 years of projects you've completed? Depending on if they're a GC or a paper GC, you want to look at, hey, well, all your risk is in the subcontractor base. So how do you manage your subcontractors' certs? And like how in depth are you getting with form checking and all of these things? Because that's what your insurance carrier is going to want to know. So breaking all of that down, you can even get into financials if it makes sense, just to show that they're a strong firm and cash flow is good. But you really want to give them so when they look at it, they have a full picture, that they don't really have many questions. You've probably answered a lot of them beforehand. They're always going to have some questions. And then in terms of a new placement, you may have to then risk control with the carriers. So based on this information, you're giving them, I think, a good snapshot of why you're saying this is a good risk. Or if they've had bad losses, you go into the specific losses and you actually tell them what happened. What did they learn? What did they change? Why shouldn't this happen again? And just give context, because the loss runs are garbage. I mean, they just say, hey, here's a loss, here's a number, and there you go. And it doesn't provide any context. I mean, I've had people where they, couldn't get, auto coverage with their package carrier. And you go into the loss and it's like, well, even number wise, this doesn't make that much sense to me, but there's like no context to what happened in the accident. And so you like go in and look at it and you actually find out, well, look, there was some contributing stuff on the other side. And then they were playing the whole lawyer game and just trying to milk a lot of money out of them.
Yeah.
End up finding out that they were lying because they're stupid and posted stuff on social media, like, you know,
oh, yeah.
things like that. And you just get some context and you're just like, look, this was a one-off. This person's never had any other issues driving. Like, based on that, will you reconsider? And again, people are people. Some places and some carriers just aren't going to be able to write stuff. But I find a lot of time once underwriters actually get a better understanding, and if it is actually a good risk, then you open up the field to having just more options, more competition. And, you know, in the end, I think it's our job, kind of like a real estate agent, to foster the best environment, to find the players that do want to write the business and then have them compete for it, rather than it just being a give me your number and okay, lowest number wins, I guess. I don't know, you know. I think it needs to just be much more strategic.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think everybody listening is hearing how much different that is than just sending in Accord information and supplemental apps. But I'm curious, doing that the right way requires a lot of engagement from the client.
Yep.
You know, you have to get that information from them. And I think that's a hurdle that some people get concerned about, because especially from the standpoint that everything we're hearing nowadays is like very fast, efficient sales process. People don't want to spend the time to sit down with you and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Which I argue against all the time. But what's your conversation look like with the client to help them understand the importance of, you know, walking you through these different claims and getting you a lot of data, which ultimately is going to help them, but maybe their prior agents never asked for that stuff. And they're saying like, well, Joshua, why do you need all this? Man, that's a lot of work for me. You know, how do you handle that conversation with the client to make sure you're able to really dive in the way that you want?
I mean, I think most of it's handled up front, so that doesn't even really become much of a question. Where I think that becomes an issue is that too many agents, they just want to quote something. And that's the problem. It's like, well, what the hell are we quoting? Like, I mean, look, if you want a quote, you don't need me. There's a billion places you can get a quote. I mean, really, that's not what I do. I mean, it's like, hey, give me a quote. I'm like, no. I'm like, well, you want me to waste my time? Like, there's no point in doing that. And so that's where the upfront conversation with the, you know, owner, CFO, all of that. My thing is always this. It's like, look, if you find that something's not working for you, okay, and you actually realize that in our conversations, then you have to build up enough authority with them to say like, hey, you can't do this the way you've always done it, because you're not the same entity you were back then.
That's great perspective.
I mean, I think I heard a silly analogy once, but you know, it's like when you're a little kid, you play with the G.I. Joe, right? And you play with your friends, you guys all have fun and all of this. Well, fast forward 5 years, 8 years, you're still the one playing with G.I. Joe. You know, you guys have grown up. Your friends would be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It just doesn't fit anymore what you were doing before. And so again, I think our industry does a very bad job in training companies and owners on maybe what to expect. But I say, hey, look, like okay, how much is that impacting your bottom line? And are we going to really treat this the way it needs to be treated, you know, very seriously? I mean, I find with most folks, it's like, look, you have your attorney, your banker, and you need your insurance and / you know, your line of business. We all need to be consulted with on all of this stuff, because when you enter into contracts, are you positive that you're insured for that? The things that you indemnify? Like, you have to be in touch with us for us in order to help you try to achieve what you're doing, because, you know, it's just like any type of risk protection. you don't want to overextend yourself unnecessarily. And you definitely don't want to be doing stuff that you're just not aware of. So again, I think that it's when you interface with these executives, you have to build up that authority where they realize they have an issue. What they're doing is not what they need to be doing in order to get the best results. And once I figured that out, or once they figure that out, then generally it's no issue. Because whether it's a president, he'll just tell his CFO or someone, get this information, and voila, it appears really fast.
Yeah.
Versus if you just go the other route, you're following up, where's the info? Like there's no kind of value there to them. So there's no buy-in because they don't really have a problem. They're just looking for another option. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just, the way you got to kind of change people's minds about how to approach this, granted them being of a certain size business, where that makes sense. You're going to have smaller people who don't need all of that, ins and outs like that. But then where we're a little bit different too is we have an entire risk mitigation team. We have loss engineers. We have claims consultants. We have data analytics folks, so people can go out in the field, do training. We have portal for online training and videos and compliance and all this stuff that our team works with our insureds to get them set up and get them using it so they can both onboard employees and assign trainings, but also just continually be sending trainings out. So it becomes top of mind across the company, whether it's just safety, facilities management, working with subs, or just everyday compliance stuff.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with all that anymore. I think the key thing there is, you're having those upfront conversations with the client. You're not getting into a position where they're expecting an easy quote process, and then you're asking them, to go deep, and they don't understand the why behind it. As long as you're having those conversations up front, and I think it's one of the best pre-qualification tools you have too.
I find, sure, there are situations where people are going to quote part of the market to try to get a big deal or something like that because, management they just don't get it or don't trust, whoever they're working with. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just kind of long term. I think if you're dealing with clients like that, it's going to make your life a little messy. Because the way I work, I go in to just get the account via BOR or AOR. And, I do that through a process where I always ask the clients, as we're going through where they may have issues and things of that nature. I just always ask them, how do you pick your insurance broker? I'm just curious, what is the criteria, that you guys use to pick your insurance broker? And most of the time it's just kind of a blank stare. And it really comes down to just sort of a gut feeling on the different people they met with, who they're going to give it to. And what I like about what we do is we have a process that we call the risk map. And every insurance company does a policy review for folks. However, our risk map when we work with these clients is to say, hey, look, let us go through your policies and we're going to highlight what's good, questions we have, and any material changes we think need to happen. And we're going to spell out why we believe that is. But then we're also going to review all your contracts for language and compliance. We're going to look at your loss history, and we can run data on it depending on the size of your claims history. So we can really pinpoint where are your losses happening and maybe figure out why that's occurring. So you can make a plan to deal with that and engage with that. And then we'll even do stuff depending on property. We'll do different analysis and run different programs for losses, whether it's on a builder's risk schedule or just property schedule, to get an idea of, are we adequately protected here, from a program standpoint. And then we just do a stewardship, and we tell them hey, if you think, we're the broker for you, then here's what we're going to plan to do during the year in between renewals to help you guys get better. And I find that when you're at the point where you actually do a study like that for someone, we even engage with their safety people and things like that to get an understanding of maybe where they feel like they need help or support. And so we put it together all in a deliverable, and we go over it and talk about it. And what I find most interesting in that is most of the time just going through the portion of, hey, here's what you currently have. You always find stuff where they're like, we didn't know that was the case. Whether it's a limit or an exclusion or just, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you usually explain it better to them than whoever they've been working with has before. And then you show them the recommendations, you show them all this other stuff, and you show them how you can support them with the claims and engaging with their employees during the year to help the company be better. And I find when you do that, I mean, most of the time you'll kind of win that battle. Again, It has to be set up correctly. You can't just come in willy-nilly and be like, hey, instead of a quote, I'll give you a risk. But it is a good approach, I find, especially for firms that have a lot more risk, because I find at the end of the day, they're not buying the insurance to pay the least amount of money. They want it so they have the right coverage.
Yeah.
And then they want a competitive price. But they're not worried about lowest cost. They want it to be competitive. They want to be with a carrier who's going to pay their claims and really have a partner that's going to be there with them for the long term.
Yeah.
So
that's been our experience as well, for sure.
Do you guys do something similar?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very in-depth, I would say, like upfront sales process that we're going to go through, which is all designed to uncover areas in which we might be able to help the client with our process. And so,
Sure.
I mean, it sounds like very similar to what you guys are doing. We'll go through that. We use Launch to help us do our assessments. We score it. We get very visual with the client. Here's some areas you should be thinking about. Here's areas you're doing well. And then we'll present a specific action plan with them over the course of the year. Maybe even extends 2 or 3 years to, longer term things that we know we need to work on. And then we'll use a lot of that information in the submission as well to make sure that, we're connecting those dots for the underwriter. I have found it really helps in the submission process when, the underwriter is going to find a lot of these things out. And so we will walk through, hey, here's the assessment we've done. Here's the results. But here's what we're doing about it. Like, we already know these things, and we're already putting a plan in place that the client's agreeing to solve for those, rather than let the underwriter catch it and be like, all right, well, we can only offer a quote if these things are in place.
Yeah.
And so I think it's
similarly with like contract language. If you look at the contracts up front, you say like, hey, you don't have this, you should put it in there. So we can show it to the underwriters because they're going to ask.
Yep, that's exactly right. And even I found like, you'll have some contractors that want to go through the recommended language with their attorneys. They're not going to get it back for 3 or 4 weeks. That still is totally fine to an underwriter if they say, hey, if we can get this or a version of some equivalent language, like in the next 90 days, we're happy. But by being proactive about it, it shows that the client actually wants to become a better business. And doesn't just want a quote to get cheaper insurance. And I think that resonates with underwriters.
Yeah, I mean, think about it like this. Agents, they don't want to have like people asking them for quotes and then not giving them the information they need and doing all this and everything. It's the same way with underwriters. They don't want to deal with agents who are sending them half complete stuff and they got to like ask them for all day, and just makes their job harder. It's sort of the same situation, but just on the other side. So it's like, make their life easy, man. Get it to them, let them be able to make a decision so they're not having to increase their workload, because again, you just don't want to be stuck where you're like, hey, we're waiting for something. Are you going to get to it?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so let's shift gears slightly to how you're acquiring new opportunities right now. So we got engaged going back and forth on LinkedIn from a couple of your posts that I really liked around the content you're sharing and things you're posting to directly at your target market clientele. Just dive into that a little bit. Like, well, how are you getting opportunities today? How does the content that you're posting fit into that? Where do you see that going? What are you doing from that angle?
Yeah, so I made a decision this year to really lean heavily into the content production and start putting stuff out there both on LinkedIn, but also moving forward, doing a lot more video on different platforms, LinkedIn included. And I really just see that as the future. I mean, everyone has seen it, since the pandemic and just everything with YouTube and all of that. And I think it's taken the business world, especially in certain industries, time to catch up. I mean, I think even 3 years ago, finding contractors and stuff on LinkedIn was more difficult. You go there today and they're there.
Yeah. Yep.
Everybody has, not everybody, a lot of people have woken up from the early adopters to the people who are now getting into it, that this is a way to really amplify your reach. And look, all the information in the world is available at people's fingertips on ChatGPT and all the search engines and everything. So they don't necessarily need salespeople in the same sense that we were gateways or gatekeepers to information. Look, they can look up this stuff and do all that, but people, they still want the human connection. They want someone who is knowledgeable and in the field, and that they also kind of resonate and click with, because no one wants to work with someone that you just aren't a good fit together, no matter how good your service is. And so I think that amplifying the reach that way and moving forward, that's just going to become more of the norm, I think, going forward. Whereas, for instance, you deal with a lot of companies today, and I cold call still, just because I've done it forever and I'm good on the phone and I'm not salesy. I just want to have a conversation with these people or get an introduction. And typically when I reach out to them, we either know someone in common from an association or from clients or whatever. And so, you're really just trying to open a conversation to build some authority with them. And that's what I do from the building side of things. Regardless of where they are, they may have the best broker in the world, and that's great. If something changes, I want to be the next one there in line for them to talk to or bounce something off of when, they have an issue with, surety, or even if it's stuff like benefits and life insurance and all of that. Our firm can handle all of that, and we have specialists in those areas that I'm able to work with. So I just kind of find that having a sort of a deep bench with your firm, being able to help these clients whenever that is, positioning yourself out there where they're going to see you again and again, just through a feed, through this, through that, you're able to build authority with them more effectively over time. And the people I know that have been doing this stuff for a little while now, all of them I talk to, they're all getting inbound leads of people that they have never talked to, never reached out to. So I really think that's kind of the way forward, both to, I don't want to say simplify, but it's just a different approach than the old school, just straight up network, which is still super important with your circle. But like the cold calling and cold emailing, it can work. All of it works. It's just a matter of the process, and do you want to be grinding all the time to drum up that business?
I'd be curious your perspective on this. I mean, one of the things that we found is even if the content marketing isn't generating direct inbound leads, it a lot of times directly supports your cold calling efforts, because you might reach out to a person completely cold, have a great conversation, but it doesn't, they're not ready to do anything yet. But you can bet they're going to Google you, and they're going to get on LinkedIn, and they're going to try to find out a little more. If they had a decent conversation, they're probably not going to say, yeah, Joshua, jump in here and quote my insurance. And if they do, you probably want to run the other way. But
exactly.
So you want them to do some research, and you want them to do their own, ask around and see who else they know and whatnot. And so the content game, if you're putting out good educational content, like you said, that sets you up as the authority, when they see that, it's going to make a bigger impression on them than just that call that, they talked to you for 5 minutes and it was great. And, they move on from.
And I'm trying to be in creating content. I mean, it's at least for me, it's a struggle. Like at first you're just, what am I creating content about? But then when you really sit down, I think what it comes down to and I'm working on things to be more effective with this, is really just talking about what is the problem, how do you solve it? Because that's really all business owners care about at the end of the day. And so speaking to that, here's the problem, how do you help solve it? Want to talk. And everything supports everything. So it's all your content, then you can use that in multiple platforms. You can use it in email. You can take the transcripts, use it in posts on anything. I mean, it really just kind of builds upon itself. So you have this reservoir of information. And just like I'm sure you guys do, you have the videos here, and then you can chop them up. You can create different segments. You can do all this stuff from the content that you produce. And so I forget his name. Who's the guy who does all of the like the school videos, and he wears the muscle shirt?
Oh, yeah, I know you're talking about too. We'll have to find it.
Yeah, I just forget out the top of my head. But he said before, he said, look, he's like, when was the best time to start creating content? He's like 10 years ago. He goes, when's the next best time? Today.
Today, yep. It's like planting the tree.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's just kind of how I see things evolving. And look, it's our industry is not fast to change.
No,
and our industry is very bifurcated. And there's so many carriers, there's so many surplus carriers. It's not something that can be packaged neatly into a box and just sold, because it's all different stuff. You're just selling complicated contracts.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think I agree with you. It's the cool thing, though. I think it's one of the most unique things about our industry is, we're all at the end of the day delivering the same types of products, the same types of solutions in general, but we can all go about it in a very unique way. And we can get leads in a unique way, and we can try to solve this in a unique way. We can do narratives in a unique way, and that's what's kind of fun is you can really dial it into who do you want to go serve, and create the systems and processes and solutions that provide value to them.
And I think it's, you work where you're strong and where you know the most. And like with construction, with our firm and our practice, I have 100 people that are smarter than me in construction on our bench and team that do anything and everything related to construction. And that's why I like it. I'm not an island. It's like, I'm not a civil guy. I don't know that, but we have our civil team. We have our energy team. We have our high-rise builder teams. We have our home builders. We have all this stuff, and they have very, very deep knowledge. So it just helps me, even though I came from the building side of things, it helps me to be able to just hop on a call with guys from my team who have either been engineers, have been surety underwriters, just all of this stuff to really be able to help, our clients. And at the end of the day, I think it just comes down to just do a good job and care. Answer your phone and call people back. I mean, it's not amazing? Rocket science. It's like, don't be afraid. Just be like, hey, you got to be there to service your clients. So service them. That's why they work with you. And it's amazing to me, just the lack of service. Look, everyone's going to make mistakes here and there. But just the lack of attention given to companies just is kind of crazy to me. But I think that's more of just a structure standpoint from whatever firm they're working with, and how the service team handles them, how the advisor or producer is involved or not involved.
I agree with that.
Account.
I agree with that. Well, cool. Well, I think I really appreciate your time. I think we've covered a lot of ground.
I appreciate the talk. Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that, you want to talk about with everybody?
Look, again, the way I work with folks is that I'm there to work with people who get it, in my view, that they want to work with a team that specializes, that's very specialized, knows their industry, knows construction, but then knows all just the other stuff around it. That's going to impact your firm. And I think when you first start out and you're a smaller contractor and all of that, you just have insurance in place to cover you if something goes wrong, and really just to be compliant. But as you get bigger, you need to put a lot of other things in place to help it sort of be that foundation for the, kind of cheesy analogy there, to help you launch and grow, so you don't run into something that really financially impacts the firm. And it's like, look, insurance renews once a year, but risk is all year long. So again, how are you engaging with your clients to just help them be a better company? And again, I find a lot of that is really just, you got to have the authority with the executives, and then really just putting together a plan for them, and then holding them accountable to working through that plan, because ultimately that's our job. That's what they're paying us for. Even if they're crazy and busy and don't have the time, you got to make them understand why, they got to meet with you on this, and deal with these things. And once I think you get in that groove, they see like, oh my God, okay, like we've almost been kind of, winging it with duct tape and tinfoil here. And luckily, knock on wood, nothing has happened. And that's what we typically find is that, look, nothing bad has happened, and that's great, but you can go look at case law and see all the bad stuff that's happened to people. And so
have you been lucky or have you been good?
Yeah. And again, with construction, so much of it is hidden over time because of the building defect. So you got to have your stuff in line, and really just work with someone who's going to be responsive to you, and really be part of your team. I mean, otherwise it's like, what are you doing? There's a million brokers and agents out there you can work with.
Totally. Awesome. Well, so if anybody wants to get a hold of you or the Baldwin Group, how could they do that?
Yeah, I mean, you can reach out to me. It's pretty easy. It's joshua.verch@baldwin.com. You can also check me out on LinkedIn, which is, just type in Joshua Verch. I should pop up. I think there's only one other Josh Verch in the world I've found so far. I think he's in Canada.
Then
go there. What's that?
Get the U.S. version.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you can message me on LinkedIn. You can email me. You can give me a call too if you like. My information's out there.
Awesome. Well, hey man, I appreciate the time. I know you're busy, and I think this was great for everybody to kind of hear your perspective and how you guys go about it. And
really appreciate you having me on today. Yeah, definitely. You guys try to get some cold weather up there this summer in Nebraska. You can't be as hot as Florida. That's just terrible.
It's hot right now, but it's the time of year. So
it is.
It's good.
Great, Elliot. Well, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you too. We'll talk next time.
Yeah. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. This podcast was created to help shift the mindset of the insurance industry, to help us go from being product peddlers to true risk management advisors. It's that same philosophy that led us to create Launch, a risk management tool that helps you, the producer, have in-depth conversations about a client's risk. Launch walks you through the assessment process, builds in-depth reports and risk scoring based on your client's answers, and delivers the presentation tools to help you close the deal. Check it out for yourself at getlaunch.io, and let's start shifting the mindset of the industry together.